Guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between, and at the end of the video, we talk about the viewer's pick of the week, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on next week's episode. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode. Of course, we're going to run down those comics, but there was a pretty big news piece that I thought I'd make the topic of the video, which is Boom Studios being bought out by Penguin Random House. So if you guys don't know, Diamond, back in the day, pre-COVID, was really the only one distributing comics. So you had Marvel, DC, all in that same funnel. Then after COVID, you had other distributors, and one of them being Penguin Random House. And obviously, Penguin's also a book distributor, and I believe publisher as well. So now we have the idea that they are not just a distributor of comic books, but then also, instead of just publishing novels, we're going to see them take over Boom Studios. The writing was a bit on the wall where the president, I believe, Philip is the vice president, co-president, left Boom Studios about a week or two ago, and you're like, okay, what's going on here? And then you do have some other patterns as well, where we get to see Power Rangers ending, one of their bigger titles. It's like, all right, licensing comics is not going to be at the forefront. Now we have something like this. Honestly, I'm curious to see what this is going to mean for Boom in the sake of where do they go towards? Are they going to do the IPs like Magic the Gathering, Power Rangers, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Are they going to continue those? Or is it going to be more of the IPs of them creating IPs, them trying to make TV shows and movies with original properties, which honestly is something they've been doing too. We've definitely been seeing a lot more bigger names going to Boom, like Tom King, and also obviously James Tynion made a big name for himself in Boom Studios with Something's Killing the Children. If I had to predict, I feel like it is going to be the latter. I think we are going to see less of the IP stuff that it has been known IP like Power Rangers, and it's going to be more building IP for TV and movies. And then also there's the idea of, again, Penguin's kind of more known for novelization, and what are they going to bring from the novelization world to the comic book world and distributing those comics / publishing it. And that's the whole other layer that's really interesting, is a distributor now being a publisher. I'm curious about that double dipping and how that's going to affect distributing and then also obviously publishing a comics. But I thought it was a pretty interesting topic, and I do believe it's going to shake up the comic book industry a lot. So we'll keep an eye on it as the months go on, but hopefully we'll also get some answers at San Diego Comic-Con, which I will be going to, so expect some videos from San Diego. But let's jump into the comics. There's also a lot of big comics that came out this week, and I had a pretty heavy haul with 11 books. So number 11 for me is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 53. This issue, we get to see a lot of the same things that we've been getting. I say this almost every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but if you've been enjoying this run and the comedy of this run, I think you'll enjoy this issue. It is a lot of the same, and it's a lot of those characters that show up. You got Wreck-Rap, you got Miss Marvel, and you get to see this combat between the minds of Peter Parker and Green Goblin. But the thing that really doesn't work for me here is that I don't think the supporting cast is as strong as previous volumes. I love Kamala, but I don't think she fits in this book. I'm not a big fan of the humor of Wreck-Rap. And then you throw in Kraven in this issue, all while the plot is not really progressing about this original sin Green Goblin aspect of the story. But at least the artwork was pretty solid for a more action-y issue, but honestly, still not really doing it for me. So giving that 2 stars, and then is number 11. Moving on to number 10, another book I know is great, but is not built for me, I'm starting to realize, and that is Transformers issue 10. I really like the first arc because I feel like it balanced the human story and the Transformer story a little bit better here. This arc in general has been really focusing more on the Transformers, and for me, I'm a little lost on that. I forget which Transformer is who. They kind of all look alike for me. I don't know if I'm going to continue Transformers. I feel like it is a great series. I respect the series, but it's not really for me as someone who really knows nothing about Transformers except for the fact of what I've learned from this series. I don't think it's extremely new reader friendly in that regard, but I do think it was a good issue. I think if you like all these Transformers, it was a well-paced issue, and it gives you a little insight on maybe the more secondary characters. So giving that 2.5 stars, and then is number 10. Moving on to number 9, The Ultimates issue 2. This was an interesting issue because it's very familiar to that first one where there's characters that I'm invested in. Like, I liked Wasp, I enjoyed Ant-Man's dynamic. And here, there's little glimpses of Captain America's past and America Chavez showing up in the end of this issue where I'm like, wow, this could go in really cool places. But then there's this backdrop of heavy mythology that I don't quite care about, that I'm like, okay, that's the part I'm not as interested in with this. I feel like it's very dense in that regard. I will continue reading it because, again, they keep giving you cliffhangers and interesting character beats, but I'm not completely sold on it either. So giving that 3 stars, and then it's number 9. Moving on to number 8, which is Action Comics 1067. I love what they're doing with Action Comics. They're utilizing this series as, hey, here's your favorite writer, here's your favorite artist, they're gonna jump in and tell their own story. Up to this point, it's been very connected to what's been going on in Superman and the DC universe, and this issue kind of takes me back a little bit, literally, because you get to see a flashback of Lois and Clark and their old days of not being married, and Lois not knowing that Superman and Clark are the same person, and there's an element of that that's really fun, but there's also an element of that that's really jarring, because I'm like, okay, absolute power is going on right now, Superman's here, why are we telling this lost story, and where is it going to connect to anything, because the previous volumes have? And I feel like if this was the first Superstar story, that would have been a little less jarring, but because this is the third and it's the only one not connected, it did get me a little bit to get my footing on the ground for this. But I do love Gail Simone's voice here, and I love the artwork, and if you're looking for a classic Superman story, that is a fun element. I also really like the secondary story. I tend not to like secondary stories very often. I think it's just to make the book bigger, and they connect sometimes they don't. This one connects really well if you're looking for the present day Superman story, and I love Rainbow's character work where she talks about, is it bad that Clark and Superman are the same person and still a journalist? And Lois kind of has to analyze that as a journalist, as a wife. And I really feel like the character work here is well done. The artwork is reminiscent to what we've been seeing with Superman. And I think it's an interesting layer to add to that dynamic. So giving that 3 stars. And that is that was number 8. So moving on to number 7, Batman and Robin, issue 11. Another kind of filler issue for this book. I know Joshua Williamson is leaving the book, which is kind of why I want to see the run through, but I have not been loving this run compared to the Robin series. But the artwork was really well done. If you're looking for this fun, action-packed issue, you get that for the most part. There's little dashes of story where we get to see Bane versus Damian, obviously everything that happened with Alfred, and then you get to see a character from Tom King's run, Bane's daughter, that hasn't shown up in a long time. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting to connect back to an old Batman story, but there's also too much going on. There's other characters introduced here where I'm like, okay, I kind of wish they focused on one thing, and that would have made it a stronger issue. There's also just a lot of blank pages, and what I mean by that is just a lot of silent pages where it just focuses a lot on the art, and for me, I tend to like a little bit more narration to let that art not have so much dialogue, but still move the story a little bit more. It's just that it makes it too much of a quick read for me when it's just the art. So overall, I gave it 3 stars. Not a bad issue, but also just wanting a bit more from the series. Moving on to number 6, another one I'm on the fence with, but there's parts I really like, and that's Crocodile Black issue 3. I like the element that I don't know anything about this main character, and you get in his head, but it's also interesting because it's so avant-garde and more artsy that you're in his head, but you're not really learning that much about him because he does have a mental illness, so that's more of what's being explored. What I like is honestly when we're not focusing on the main character and we just see his family reacting to him and what he's up to. And those are the pages that kind of make me stick around for the next issue, but the actual main event of his vigilantism I think could be a bit stronger. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, Absolute Power Task Force number 7. I like this issue because I think it was a really good connection Absolute Power event that I don't know if I'm sold on or not. I like this as a tie-in, focusing on characters you most likely are not going to get from the main series. But a big but of why this is lower is that it's connected to an issue of Wonder Woman that doesn't come out for a whole nother month. Because I felt like I missed something. So I was like, wait, Captain Marvel and Mary Marvel lost their powers? That's weird. I don't remember that. And then I looked at what issue was being referenced, and it's Wonder Woman issue 11. I was like, did that come out yet? And I looked it up, and it literally comes out not even like next week, comes out in a month. And I'm like, I felt like this could have been lined up better, because this could have been a really good issue, and instead it was just a fine issue. I was just kind of trying to put the pieces together of what happened in that issue to make this a bit more enjoyable. But I liked Mary's and Captain Marvel's interaction. I enjoyed just seeing how they act without powers and how that's connected to Amanda Waller. Artwork is pretty solid as well. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, but maybe the lineup of the schedule could have been a bit better. Moving on to number 4, which is Kill All Immortals issue 1. I was really looking forward to it. I like the concept. It's very mob-like, I would say, where we get to see this girl who wants to just kind of live her life, goes back to the family, and the family's got some issues. And we get to see it from the point of view of her boyfriend, and he learns that they're immortal, and I'm sure there'll be more backstory to that. But I like the vibe. I like what was introduced here. I don't know if it totally sucked me in. I don't know if there's a character moment where I'm like, wow, I really want to follow her or follow him. But I think there's an interesting concept here, and I think the art style fit really well for the tone it was going for. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3. I'm actually surprised it's released so quickly, but Primer Clashing Colors issue 1. The first series just ended. I know it's from a book that was published like 2 years ago. Now they're like, okay, we're doing another volume, and here it is. I don't know if the graphic novel came out first for this or they're releasing the graphic novel later. I'm not really sure what they're doing with that. But I like this issue. It's a really good follow-up. There's definitely moments where they're like catching you up, which is interesting again for a series that, for me at least, has just been released. And, you know, there are moments where, because it's an all-ages books, I do feel like you're being talked down to a little bit, but I think the plot is really, really strong for this one, where we get to see new characters introduced. The Teen Titans are involved, even though I think it's interesting that it seems like it's the Teen Titans version from the 2000s cartoon instead of Teen Titans Go, and I feel like kids probably know Teen Titans Go more than the other Teen Titans, so that was interesting to see them lay out. But I also like that they used a cartoon instead of maybe the comic version of them, and they brought a fun dynamic. It really is just a new layer of like, she's a hero now, what does she do with that? And obviously you still have a lot of family drama and school drama, and I just think it's a pretty well balanced series. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, this is the big book of the week, and I was pleasantly surprised by it, and that is X-Men issue 1. I did get the cover A, and I got the Ileana cover. I was pleasantly surprised by it. You know, if you've watched the reviews before, you know I didn't really love the Krakoa era. I didn't love how the series was always about humans versus, you know, X-Men versus the mutants, and then at the same time they made it so surface level. It's like human bad, mutant good, and that's kind of it. And I like when that relationship's a little muddled, where you get to see the good and bad X-Men, you see the good and bad humans, and you see that here as well. But also there is a little Krakoa for the people that like it. In the end, it does kind of leave you off of like, we're tricking this human to be friends with us because we want something more. And I like that this book felt very familiar to old X-Men, still has the remnants of Krakoa, all while playing a different setting with, I believe it was Alaska, that we get to see them in a new town or new city. So I like that element, and I think it was a good introduction. I really like the characters and their chemistry. Like, just seeing Juggernaut and Ileana fight and play rock or paper scissors was very fun. Something I feel like, again, that was a little bit more missing from the Krakoa age. So I liked it. I thought the art was really strong. It was a good first entry to this new era of X-Men. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, I think a perfect tie-in, and that is Green Lantern issue 13. One of my favorite books on stands. I talk about it all the time, but this is how you do a tie-in. Because I was a little worried where I'm like, okay, you left off the series in a really big spot. You know, Carol and Hal are getting back together. We're getting to see a lot more drama with the other lanterns and the different colors, so we're seeing that. I'm like, well, now we have absolute power and all that's going to be interrupted. But no, they actually pick up the threads really nicely to tie into absolute power, tie into everything going on with Amanda Waller, all while continuing multiple storylines with different Green Lanterns. The character who was going to marry Carol has a little bit thing going on with him, which I was like, wow, I thought he was just going to be a throwaway character. That's really cool that we're going to see maybe some Green Lantern mythos with him. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really well balanced. If you are a Green Lantern fan, there's just so many different characters here. You get to see Kyle and his White Lantern side of things. You get to see Jessica Cruz and her relationship with Fear, all while Hal is also dealing with being kidnapped and his feelings for Carol. Really enjoyed this one. Give it 4.5 stars. If you're looking for a good absolute power tie-in, I say this is the one. So that is my pick of the week. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was. And the viewer's pick of the week from last week was Space Ghost issue 3. And here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one.